One of the most persistent, obnoxious, and frankly intellectually dishonest political cliches is this idea that at some point in this mythic past, the country wasn't divided, or it can be America or Canada or whatever, but the nation wasn't divided. There were common national values. Things weren't so partisan. There wasn't this ideological divide. People just could agree on things. Now, they will often say this after talking about like segregation and civil rights and how gay people couldn't get married and the Civil War and slavery and the nullification crisis. So they'll go through basically a narrative that America's always been a divided country. But then we come to the idea that there was this imagined past in the 90s or 80s or 60s or whatever, where there was this common understanding that can be appealed to, and that for whatever reason, people have to get back to it. And I saw this a lot, particularly in the aftermath of Charlie Kirk's death, where people were saying, oh, we have all this violence, all these people, it's so bad that they're acting this way. We can all agree that political violence is bad, and we have to come together as Americans. And there's always this appeal to this, and there's never any like specifics. They'll just say common sense, or they'll say common values or something. They'll never really define what those are. They might say freedom or equality or whatever, but the understanding of that between the various sides within the United States and within Canada and within any Western country are just so different that people don't live in the same world. They don't live in the same universe. Their understandings of basic concepts are just completely incompatible with each other. And I think this idea that they can be reconciled is frankly very dishonest and very condescending to people who have deeply held moral beliefs. Like, let's go through a couple examples. If you actually take people's rhetoric seriously and assume they believe what they say they believe, I don't really get how there can be anything resembling a compromise. So if you're on the left and you think that the police are running death squads and they're ethnically cleansing blacks, how do you, and then on the right, you think that the police aren't doing that, how do you come to a compromise on that? Do you say, well, maybe they're doing a little bit of ethnic cleansing, maybe we like sort of abolish the police? I guess there's always the cliche, we just have to reform the police force and make it better. But inevitably what that always leads to is we just can't punish criminals, or it's the fault of society or something. Like, if you legitimately think that government is run by white supremacists who are using the police force to ethnically cleanse black neighborhoods, I don't get, like, how can you find common ground with conservatives on that? And on the right, if you're pro-life and you legitimately and truly believe that abortion is killing a baby, how are you supposed to compromise with the left on that? You're supposed to go, well, maybe we can kill fewer babies. Maybe instead of like 30 million, we can kill 10 million. And that's like the common sense solution or whatever. And I just think that's very disrespectful to people who have these deeply held beliefs. And I mean, you go issue by issue and you find on most of them, these things are just not reconcilable. There is no middle position. There is no moderate position. The basic understanding of how reality even functions is so fundamentally different between the two sides. This idea that there's any kind of shared values you can appeal to, I find is just absurd. And once again, I find it kind of insulting, both to my intelligence and to the moral convictions of these people. Like, let's just go through some other examples, because this is something I find I really have to just give example after example to kind of show what I mean. There was a widespread belief that when Trump got reelected, women would just lose all rights over their bodies and women couldn't vote anymore. And if you go on Twitter, you'll see people, and sure, they're exaggerating a bit, but they do believe, a lot of them, that when Trump got reelected, women just lost all their rights. Or during the election, they said, if Trump gets reelected, then women won't be able to vote. And they legitimately believe those things. And it doesn't really matter what you say to them and what you do. they will continue to believe that. And there's no way you can really change their mind on it. I mean, similarly in Canada, we have this whole narrative of like this genocide with the residential schools, and it didn't matter that they didn't find any mass graves. The one side is just 100% convinced it's there, and the fact that there's no evidence proves that it happened, or whatever. And like, what is the compromise position there? Like, you would think the compromise would be maybe there was like some issues, but there wasn't like ethnic cleansing. But that's not what that they can't agree on that position. The differences go beyond just policy disagreements, like how healthcare should be structured. Should it be public or private insurance? What should the exact criminal penalties should be for certain crimes? It goes beyond that, and it goes into just something a lot more deep and a lot more primal. Having come from Canada and growing up among just basically left-wing people who basically function like blue state Americans do, I can say that a lot of them don't view conservatives as human beings. Like, they don't view them as rational beings who have a soul. They view them as basically just being subhuman. And they will constantly just talk about how they hate Southerners and they hate people who own guns, even though a lot of people own guns in Canada. And they hate religious people. And they'll just complain about Fox News. And like I said, I've had Mennonite family members who have talked about wanting to kill the entire NRA membership list. It can be a conversation about basically just something completely unrelated, and they will just find a reason to bring up how much they hate people from the southern United States, or how much they hate people who voted for Pierre Poilievre, or how much they hate Fox News. And they will just bring it up, and they will speak with such contempt and such total disregard for those people's existence. You can very clearly tell they don't consider them to be human beings. And at that point, how do you come to a common understanding with that? And in practice, if you look at what a lot of these people do, they want whatever they define as hate speech to be illegal and to put people in jail for that. Like in the UK, it's insane the number of people who are thrown in jail on a regular basis for posting memes on Facebook. I've looked it up. I need to do an exact, like a video on this in more depth. But to my understanding, more people are arrested for political crimes in the UK in absolute terms than in either Russia or China, and maybe the both of them combined. So you have one side who wants to arrest the other side if they say anything they disagree with, and the other side who doesn't think people should be arrested if they say something they disagree with. And there's supposed to be common ground there. Like, what is the common ground? We only arrest people if they say, I guess that is the common ground, maybe. Like, if people drop an N-bomb or the K slur or the F slur or something, they go to jail. But if they complain about crime rates, they don't go to jail. And they can complain about Eastern European immigration, but not Indian subcontinent immigration, or just some nonsense like this. The point I'm trying to make is, if you're male, if you're white, if you're Christian, if you're heterosexual or whatever, there is a sizable percentage of society that hates you on a deep and personal level and wants to see you removed, displaced, put in a concentration camp, and just basically wiped out. And I just don't get how you're supposed to compromise and find common ground with people who objectively want to kill you. And like, getting back to Charlie Kirk, as I've said, if you are someone on the left who legitimately believes Charlie Kirk was a Nazi, who was going to take away all of women's rights, and he was going to basically, like, he wanted society to be like the Handmaid's Tale, and they were just going to lock up women and use them as ex-lotto tanks, then isn't that the rational thing to do, to physically remove him? I'm not saying I support it or anything. I'm just saying, within the context of their worldview, doesn't that make sense? And from their perspective, how are they supposed to compromise with someone like that? If Trump is going to bring about another Holocaust and he's the next Hitler, how are they supposed to find common ground on that issue? They just can't. I mean, I guess we could have some lame bipartisan compromise or whatever, but in practice, that just means conceding entirely to the political left. It means like giving them 90% of what they want in exchange for 10% of what conservatives want, and then calling it a good deal. It is more or less how I find it, at least. But yeah, that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to go and find common ground with Vaush or Hussein Piker. I remember when COVID happened, Vaush talked about how he wanted to put people who wouldn't get the COVID vaccine in concentration camps and starve them to death. But that is like that is an indication that we're like divided, and we have to sit down and have a conversation with him. And the people who want to abolish the police and just make crime legal, we have to sit down and have a conversation with them too. And somehow it'll just kind of like work out. And I just don't think so. I just don't think you can compromise. You can have an agreement. You can come to a common understanding with people who openly want to kill and destroy you. And not just you as a person, but your race, your religion, your gender, whatever it is. And likewise, it's from the left as well. They view the same thing. They feel if Trump wins re-election, he's just going to kill all gay people. And a lot of them will just legitimately and honestly believe that. So how are they supposed to be friends with Trump supporters? And this almost always comes from conservatives. I do find this comes from the left, but it's very disingenuous, obviously so, when it comes from them. But if you look at any kind of study on this, the percentage of people who won't have friends of a different political persuasion is so massively shifted towards people on the left. It's insane. Like, I don't recall the exact numbers, but an overwhelming percentage, if I recall, of people on the left will not have friends of different political views. And then it's the exact opposite among conservatives. And that's one of the many reasons that conservatives just always lose, is they have this, and this is a very boomer con thing, that we just have to sit down and be rational and stuff like that. And I don't know if it's just to be maybe charitable. Maybe it's just a cope because they don't want to recognize how bad things have gotten and what will be necessary in order to resolve things. That at some point they will have to use state power, they will have to use oppression, they will have to use force to deal with their political opponents who want to wipe them out. And that's a hard place to be, and that's a hard thing for these people to accept. And so they just kind of keep pushing on and on, trying to find that alternate solution, trying to think that if we just debate hard enough or we try hard enough, then society will go back to this mythical state of unity. But it's not possible. It's just that these people live in completely different worlds. There's no overlap. There's no shared values. One side wants to destroy the other, and the other side probably should want to destroy the side that wants to destroy them, but they're deluded, so they don't. And it's just, like I said, it's just a mythical past that I don't think ever really existed, and is mostly just a cope to try to avoid coming to some very dark conclusions about where we're headed as a society and headed as a civilization. So, hope people found that rant interesting. God bless everybody, and I'll talk to you all real soon.